All right, so move on to the next segment. I'll be sharing my personal list of my favorite NFL shootouts in NFL history. So, I'm a youngster. As you guys know, I'm only 25 years of age, so I'm not going to go down the pipeline of the 1930s, the 60s, the 80s. I'm talking about when we see in color. Color of favorite shootout games that I have witnessed in my lifetime. So, these are my personal list. I have 4 games on the list. Starting off with number 1. The classic shootout game in 2013 between the Dallas Cowboys and the Denver Broncos. Oh my goodness. That matchup in the regular season in 2013 was spectacular, was phenomenal, was everything you want as an offensive fan for the game of football. And it was back and forth scoring between two respective offenses. It was Peyton Manning's Denver Broncos that had Peyton Manning, Demaryius Thomas, Wes Welker, Eric Dickerson. Eric Decker against Tony Romo's high-power offense of Tony Romo, Dez Bryant, Jason Witten, Cole Beasley, and several others. The final score of that ball game was 51-48. The Broncos obviously went on to win that ball game. Peyton Manning put together a pretty good game. Threw for 414 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns, just had 1 interception. But then Tony Romo balled out as well. He threw for 506 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, 1 interception. Unfortunately, choked the game away within 2 minutes of the ball game, as the Dallas Cowboys could have went on to put together a game-winning drive, but Tony Romo did what he did best in big-time moments. Choked the game away, and the Broncos went ahead, killed the clock, and hit a 28-yard field goal or a 30-yard field goal to win the game. But that was a spectacular blowout between Peyton Manning and Tony Romo back in 2013. So let's move on. My next favorite shootout game was the 2018 shootout game between the Los Angeles Rams and the Kansas City Chiefs back in 2018 on that Monday Night Football game. Good God. That was a spectacular game. I think that is the greatest Monday Night Football game in NFL history. I have to say it in terms of excitement, in terms of scoring, in terms of entertainment. They set the bar for what it's like to have a high-stakes, high-powered, high-scoring affair on a Monday Night Football game. But the historic matchup, you had the Rams offense led by Jared Goff and their masterminded head coach Sean McVay taking on Andy Reid and a young Patrick Mahomes. So that was a classic game, one for the ages. There was a total of 1,001 yards combined by both teams offensively. And a losing effort, the Kansas City Chiefs had a total of 546 total offensive yards. The final score of that game was 54-51. The Rams went ahead and won that ball game. One of the most exciting games I've ever seen in my life. That was everything you wanted in a high-scoring offensive game. But moving on to the next game on my list, that epic 2015 matchup between the New Orleans Saints and the New York Giants. Now, this was a battle of two quarterbacks who, in my opinion, will one day be in the NFL Hall of Fame. That being Drew Brees and that being Eli Manning. They had a classic game that really doesn't get talked about, in my opinion, in terms of shootouts that we've seen, especially in the 21st century. This game really goes under the radar because I do believe at that time both teams were floating around the 500 mark. But this game, it was in the conversation for being one of Drew Brees' best games of his NFL career. I mean, he threw for 505 passing yards, 7 passing touchdowns, and led the Saints to a game-winning drive in this game. And don't get me wrong, Eli Manning brought his goods to the game and balled out as well. I mean, he had a total of 350 passing yards with 6 passing touchdowns. So neither quarterback was letting up in this ball game. Definitely one for the ages. That has to go as an underrated game and recent memory in the NFL between the Saints and the Giants back in 2015. Now, last game on my list is the Arizona Cardinals versus Green Bay Packers wild card game in 2009. Now, I remember this one when I was in 5th grade. I was in 5th grade at the time. So I was in 5th grade. I remember this ball game taking place in a wild card back in 2009. It was an epic playoff game between the Cardinals and the Packers. Both treated this game like the NFC Championship, when you had the Arizona Cardinals having their dreams and aspirations set for the season. trying to get back to the Super Bowl as they lost the previous year to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger and company, and Santana Holmes making that spectacular catch in the end zone, that toe tap touchdown grab. But as I digress, that wild card game between the Cardinals and Packers was an absolute classic. And you had legends. I mean, we didn't know Aaron Rodgers was going to be a legend, but you had legends going back between some of the guys greatest to ever do it at the QB position of Kurt Warner and Aaron Rodgers balling out, going back and forth toe-to-toe against each other in this divisional round. The final score of this game was 51-45 in the winning favor of the Arizona Cardinals. But that quarterback matchup was epic, man. I'm looking at the stats right here. Kurt Warner had 379 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns. Meanwhile, you had Aaron Rodgers, who had 423 passing yards with 4 passing touchdowns. Absolute classic game between the two respective icons and legends at the quarterback position. And that's really, in my opinion, looking back at this game, that's pretty much what put Aaron Rodgers on the pedestal to competing at a high level in the playoffs. I mean, he didn't really know better at this time and still went head-to-head, toe-to-toe with a Hall of Famer, Kurt Warner, and then really went on to be one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, in my opinion, for Aaron Rodgers' sake. I mean, could he have more rings? Yes. But in terms of pure talent and guys who can put the zip on the ball, I think Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest to ever do it. I've obviously said that on the podcast in the past. He's obviously a top 5 all time, in my opinion. But as I digress, that is my favorite NFL shootout games in NFL history.